Production by
Michael Lofton.
You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Your host, Michael, on a Thursday evening. Yeah, a lot going on today. Got several streams coming up, actually. We have Dr. William Marshner coming on in a little bit. And Lewis as well. Well, Dr. Marshall made a post yesterday and also a video today, and somebody sent both of them to me. And I thought that they were worth addressing to help balance out some of this stuff that we're seeing from Dr. Marshall. Once again, and I'm going to continue to do that, as well as balance out some others. I do want to first, however, say that I have some sympathy for some of the things that Dr. Marshall is saying in his most recent video earlier today, where he was addressing, let me in fact pull it up here, the kissing of the Quran by John Paul II. I have some sympathies with, some of the things that he's saying. And I actually think that some of what he's saying needs to be said to help balance out some of the stuff that we even see, not only from liberals, but also some conservative Catholics who, yes, they rightly note that there are some true elements in other religions. Yes, that's true. But at what point are we going to talk about the false aspects to these religions? At what point are we going to talk about the dangerous aspects to these religions? At what point are we going to warn people from those elements of corruption in their religion and point them to Christ, who gives us the pure revelation of God the Father? At what point are we going to have that discussion? Yes, it's true. They have some elements that are true and their false religions. Yes, but as I have noted many times, they also have some very dangerous elements that work against the gospel and that could help mislead that person and lead them away from Christ. And so you have a conflict between these good elements that are good and true, but also these bad ones. And so it's a very dangerous place to be. So nobody should think that they should be secure in some false religion. So I appreciate some of what he's saying because it needs to be said to balance out those who will come out and say, well, they have some true elements. Yes, they do. At least nobody who knows what they're talking about is disputing that. But we still need to have this other conversation about they have some false elements and some elements that are corrupt. They're going to take things away from Christ and the gospel and make that person less disposed to the true elements in their religion and less disposed to the fullness of the faith. River says, Michael's going to steal my show's thunder. I'm going to have to rant extra hard to be entertaining now. I look forward to it, River. So far, you've delivered on every show. Really good stuff. I'm sure your next show will be good. So don't worry there. Yeah, but so again, I appreciate some of what he's saying, but then we got to balance him out. That's the problem here. Sorry, I'm a little sick today. We got to balance him out. We got to balance out the liberals. We got to balance out some of the conservatives that want to talk about only the positive aspects and never want to really address the uncomfortable stuff and the negative stuff. We need to do that. But then we now got to balance out those who recognize that problem, but then go too far. We got to find a nice, happy medium. Can we do that? Let's start with the screenshot from Twitter. Somebody sent this to me. Let me share my screen here. Okay. This individual here says, I watched on YouTube the 10 evil popes. The 10 evil popes. Don't think Francis is anywhere near those popes. Well, Dr. Marshall responds and says, did any of those top 10 evil popes promote worship of pagan idols? Read the prophet Ezekiel for what happens next. Two things here. First of all, in the prophet Ezekiel, in the book of Ezekiel, what happens next is God leaves the temple, right? What's he implying? What is Dr. Marshall implying? So if Pope Francis has been guilty of idolatry and he's comparing it to, well, what happens next in the book of Ezekiel, and that is that God leaves the temple, what is he implying? That God has left the Vatican, that God has left St. Peter's Basilica, that God has left the papacy? I don't know. I mean, what is he implying? One of those seems like maybe that might be the case. I don't know which. There's some ambiguity here with Dr. Marshall. Good old-fashioned ambiguity. And as I've noted before, well, if you're not going to clarify some of this ambiguity, well, you can't really criticize Pope Francis for not clarifying his ambiguity. I'm just saying. Let's be consistent. Read the prophet Ezekiel for what happens next. Can we clarify that, Dr. Marshall? What does happen next, and how is that applicable to Pope Francis? Now, let's question the other part. Did he promote worship of pagan idols? Now, let me first say, the issue with Pachamama, I think, is scandalous. It was imprudent. Should have never been done. I think that Pope Francis needs to publicly repent of it. It was imprudent. Did he promote the worship of pagan idols? I'm not convinced of that. But I am convinced that he gave that impression to quite a few people, and that scandalized people, and that is something that needs to be addressed. Now, let's talk about this briefly. When we talk about the Pachamama, this individual who's presenting the figure to Pope Francis, as has been noted before, even on this show, the figure was presented as Our Lady of the Amazon. Now, they were saying that this is an image of the Virgin Mary. So I get why they would say, okay, well, that's technically not pagan worship because this is an appropriation of their culture and using that as an image of Mary. Okay. It's not a good idea to use something like that in this situation when people aren't going to perceive it that way. And it wasn't clearly stated either. We just hear her saying, Our Lady of the Amazon, but it wasn't clearly made known in advance. Hey, this is an image of the Virgin Mary that we're appropriating from this culture and blah, blah, blah. None of that was made clear. This was extremely imprudent to do. It's not pagan worship, but it is extremely imprudent because most people aren't going to see, oh, they're appropriating their image to the veneration of the Virgin Mary. Look at that. That's not how people are going to interpret this. Most people are going to see this and say, wow, they're worshiping idols there in the Vatican. That's what they're going to say, right? So this was extremely scandalous and imprudent. Moreover, why appropriate this image? That's a terrible image to appropriate. It's ugly, first of all. Second of all, she's naked. It's not a good image to appropriate. Could we choose some other pagan image to appropriate for the Virgin Mary? Please, something else that's a little less visually offensive than this. Just saying. Well, and some might wonder, okay, well, wait. Y'all are talking about appropriating pagan images. What's going on there? Look, and this is something Dr. Marshall doesn't seem to realize, and I'm going to show it here in a moment on the video. Dr. Marshall doesn't seem to realize we have that in our own tradition. If he knows that, he's not connecting the dots and saying that, well, what they're doing here by appropriating this image to the veneration of the Virgin Mary isn't new in our tradition. For example, Our Lady of Guadalupe. That image took some aspects from pagan culture. The Virgin Mary took some elements and aspects in her representation in that image from paganism, in the pagan culture at that time. And she appropriated it to herself. She baptized those elements, as we call it in the Christian tradition, which is something that we've done for since time immemorial. We take elements that can be taken. There's some elements have to be discarded, but we take some elements from paganism and appropriate them and baptize them into Christianity. That has always been our policy as Catholics. There are some elements that we can't take and appropriate. Okay, human sacrifice. You can't say, well, let's sacrifice these people for Jesus. We can't do that. But we can sacrifice our lives in sacrificial love, right? We can do that, but we can't take, pagan sacrificial systems and say, well, we're just now converting it over to sacrificing for Jesus. Some elements you can't appropriate, right? Some elements you can. That's what's going on here, is that they were appropriating these pagan elements. It was being done extremely imprudently and scandalously, if you ask me. It was a horrible decision. And instead of Pope Francis coming out and saying, wait, I'm sorry, this was a really bad judgment on my part, he just doubled down. What do you do? I mean, it's a terrible decision, and to go and double down was even more of a slap in the face. But I don't think that you can accuse him of promoting pagan idol worship. If there were any people, if there was some person there present who was not appropriating this as the Virgin Mary and was intending to worship a pagan idol, then yeah, they're guilty of the sin of idolatry. But let's ask this. With the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, could there have been some people at that time that would have seen the image of the Virgin and would have worshipped her instead of just venerating her? I'm sure that was possible. Does that mean by the Catholic Church approving of that image and the Virgin Mary herself approving of this image, does that mean that the Virgin Mary is now promoting worship? No. Some things can be abused. We recognize that, right? But abuse doesn't negate proper use. But what I am questioning here is not what they're doing in theory as far as appropriating these images to the Virgin Mary. What I am questioning is the timing of this, the way in which it was done. Do you really think today is a good climate and culture and context for us to be doing this kind of stuff? Do you really think this is a good idea? Clearly, this wasn't a good idea, because it's clearly in the minds of some people still they see it and perceive it as idolatry. So it was a terrible idea. It just gave unnecessary offense. So while I appreciate the criticism of these things, I don't want to go this far and now saying he's promoting the worship of pagan idols. And read what happens with the prophet Ezekiel next. Well, the Spirit of God left the temple. That's what happened. So is the Spirit of God gone from the papacy or gone from St. Peter's Basilica? What are you saying? I need some clarification. Of course, we're not going to get any from Dr. Marshall. He's been watching the videos. I'm asking these questions for clarification, and he still doesn't give them. So And somebody asked me, how do I know he's watching the videos? Well, because he accidentally liked one of my videos, then unliked it. So I know he's watching them. Or at least he's paying attention at least to the headlines. I don't know if he actually sits there and watches the whole thing. From what I gather, he doesn't. But he's at least aware of what I'm saying, I should say. And I've asked for clarification in these previous videos, and then I didn't get it. So, okay, that's fine. He's not obligated to respond to any questions that I ask, but I'm just saying it's not just me asking these things. It's a lot of people who are also wondering. So if you make ambiguous comments that is confusing people and you fail to correct them, who does that remind you of? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It reminds us of somebody who's on our screen right here. So you can't really criticize Pope Francis for not clarifying some things. Okay. So I want to go to a couple clips here from the video that Dr. Marshall did earlier. And let's talk about it, because he's talking about, did Pope John Paul II kiss the Quran? First of all, I want to say this. I do think that it was a Quran. Yes. And I also think that, and by the way, let me boot some trolls here from the chat. I also do think that the issue here with the kissing of the Quran is the same problem as with the Pachamama. I don't think that John Paul II was intending idolatry or anything in this, but it was extremely imprudent and scandalous. His intention allegedly was that he wants to show his honor and respect for Islam, which, why was that even necessary? But putting that to the side, okay, but is this the best way to do that? Is this really, you're going to confuse everybody. You want to honor and respect something, but it has false elements in it that denies the deity of our Savior. So what people are going to hear when they hear you say that you want to respect this, or what people are going to see when they see you kiss the Quran, is they're going to think that you approve of what it says. And that's reasonable for them to conclude that, even if it's not what you intend. This is why I say it was scandalous, imprudent. It should not have been done. We can look for other ways to somehow respect. I don't even, why was this even necessary? I'm still trying to figure that out, but we can look for some other elements to respect some aspects, I guess, of Islam. But I also at the same time want to criticize some aspects of Islam, the parts that are preventing people from coming to Christ. Maybe those elements, the parts that are misleading and even blasphemous. I want to criticize those. So maybe we can respect some aspects, but we also need to criticize some of the others. And that wasn't being done, so this was extremely imprudent. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm sure he did not mean any harm, but at this point, when you're a pope, everything that you do is being scrutinized. And I think by this time, John Paul II should have known better than to do this. It is what it is. So let's start at the 20-minute mark and play just a few clips here. Did you hear that? Idols, Pachamamas. For Dr. Marshall, Pachamama equals an idol. Are we going to say that about the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe? Are we going to look? And that's just one. I can give you a lot of other examples. There's a lot of things that we've taken from paganism and appropriated into Christianity. We've baptized them. There's a lot of things in our history where we've done that. Are those idols? No, they're not. But at the same time, I agree that the Pachamama event shouldn't have been done and was scandalous and imprudent. So I want to sympathize with him on the one hand, but then I got to now balance him out, because now he's going to go too far. Now, if we're going to now say that he's promoting idolatry, where do you think that's going to lead? Sedevacantism. That's their exact arguments. And they're now going to present cases where if a pope is guilty of idolatry or something like this, they're immediately deposed, and they're going to present those kinds of arguments. This is sedevacantism material. That's exactly where I honestly feel like Taylor Marshall is becoming the greatest sedevacantist evangelist at this point. Y'all think I'm joking, but I'm the recipient of messages all day long where I hear about it. So I'm not joking. I think he's becoming a really great evangelist indirectly, unintentionally, for sedevacantism and, by extension, Eastern Orthodoxy. So, I mean, I got to balance him out. I did a video the other day respectfully balancing out some things that I saw with Bishop Barron in his sermon on the salvation of non-Catholics. But now I'm also doing one balancing this out, because I think that both have some elements in them that aren't right, and those need to be addressed. But this one is what's really concerning, because anybody who has half a brain is going to hear what Dr. Marshall says and take it to their logical conclusion. I don't know why Dr. Marshall hasn't done that already. Maybe he has and just hasn't told us, or maybe he hasn't. But it just seems like, wait, if you actually believe the Pope is promoting idolatry and maybe even guilty of idolatry himself, why are you still Catholic? Why do you still believe Pope Francis is Pope? In light of what you believe about the papacy, why do you still believe that he's the Pope? You see what I'm saying? It makes so much more sense to see this as leading to sedevacantism. Now everybody's telling me to read the chat. Well, okay, y'all did not hear the clip. Well, that's odd, because the sound was enabled. So let me play it again. I'm glad I saw this early on too and didn't sit there and play 10, 20 minutes of audio or something. Let me stop the screen, share it again. Let's try it one more time. Let me know if it doesn't share the audio this time. Let's see.
This in 2 Corinthians 6.
Can y'all hear that?
Verse 14 through 17. Verse 14, bear not the yoke.
They said we've been screaming over here the last 4 minutes. Well, but you'll still see what I'm saying here. It'll make more sense, and I'll reiterate it here in just a moment. I think I saw super chat too. Okay, there's no sound. I apologize. Look, it's hard to juggle chat and this and messages on the phone and everything. It's hard. It's hard to multitask some of this stuff. So I apologize. I thought the sound was enabled. I can hear it. That's part of the problem, is I can hear the sound. And whenever y'all can't, I don't know. I don't know when y'all can't. So the only way I'll know is reading the chat. So sorry about that. Let's hear it again.
With unbelievers. For what participation have justice with injustice, or what fellowship have light with darkness? And what concord have Christ with Belial? Or what part hath the faithful with the unbeliever? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? Pachamama.
There.
Mamas.
Did you hear that? Let's play it again.
Or what part hath the faithful with the unbeliever? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? Pachamamas.
Again, he equates Pachamamas with idols. And again, how does this work with the fact that they did present this image as Our Lady of the Amazon, not as an idol? They presented this as Our Lady of the Amazon. Now you might say, well, Pope Francis called it a Pachamama. Yeah, I get that. Even just continues to go to support this narrative. How imprudent was that for him to now go and call it a Pachamama, which is just simply going to reinforce this mentality of people who think that it's an idol. It's just going to simply reinforce them. I think he was just doing that by way of convenience. This is what most people know the image as at this point. This is what they're calling them. So, but I'm thinking that he would think this is an appropriated Pachamama, appropriated to Our Lady of the Amazon. Well, again, if we're going to automatically equate Pachamama to idols, can we automatically equate Our Lady of Guadalupe to an idol? Can we automatically equate pagan temples that we converted to Catholic churches to pagan temples? Can we automatically call them pagan temples? Or can we say that no, some of these elements can be baptized? So that's effectively what I was getting at, is that he immediately assumes these things and goes too far, and I want to balance that out, but I also want to balance out some of the other things that I hear from others who are saying, but yeah, there are true and good elements in these religions, which is true, but that doesn't then mean we can scandalize people. That then doesn't mean that we can kiss Qurans, also scandalous. That we shouldn't be doing any of that. We've lost the concept of not scandalizing people, right? I mean, you can't do that. You're going to scandalize people. It's imprudent. So I'm trying to balance out some of these different trends and tendencies that I'm seeing right now in Catholicism the best that I can. And, I know it's a small channel, so I have a very small voice. Most aren't listening, but I'm trying to do the best that I can for those of y'all who watch and others who are going to see the videos in the future, hoping that it's going to help a little. Let's move forward.
Continuing, quote, "For you are the temple of the living God, as God said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." Verse 17, "Wherefore go out from among them." And
all right, again, Philip Burns says, I don't see the comparison at all. Our Lady of Guadalupe was not a pagan goddess from some other religions, but the image that she used was. Those images, the parts of the image that is on Our Lady of Guadalupe are taken from pagan goddesses. That's the point. Moreover, I can show you in the preconciliar era where we actually have an image of Our Lady as Pachamama. Let me pull it up. It's kind of odd, but I mean, it's part of some of the things that we've done as Catholics. There you go. Our Lady appropriated from Pachamama. There you go. No, I know there's more to it than that, but I mean, there's what I'm saying is, still substantially the case. So, all right, let's see here. Let me go back to the timestamp that I wanted to get to. It was around the 26 mark, but we could probably just watch from here to the 26 mark. I think that'll be fine.
"Be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing." End quote. What's the unclean thing here? Idols, the representations of Belial, the cultic items of the other temples, the other shrines, the other altars.
And by the way, somebody is saying that the Vatican made a statement that this was not a depiction of Our Lady. Yeah, they said it was neither sacred or profane. Yeah, I get that, which caused the confusion even more. Which goes to also show that some of the others that are there in the Vatican don't believe that it was Our Lady of the Amazon. They believe that it was just a symbol of Mother Earth, which is bad because you can't be venerating a symbol of Mother Earth. I think that that's extremely dangerous territory. If you're just purely speaking Mother Earth, venerating that image, we don't do that in the Christian tradition. I can see us venerating icons because those people are made in the image of Christ, but Earth, I mean, what's going on here? So that makes no sense. But the fact is, despite that statement, the lady that we saw in that picture says Our Lady of the Amazon when she hands it to Pope Francis. That's a pure fact. You can listen to the audio and hear it. So yes, they made it even worse because then Pope Francis calls it Pachamama, and then you hear uh, some others who are clarifying and saying, no, it's not an image of the Virgin Mary, but it's also not a pagan image either. It's neither sacred nor profane. It's just like, I mean, you're just trying to confuse people, aren't you? You're just trying to support scandal at this point. So again, I understand that side of the argument. I get it. I've made that argument myself. I get it. What I'm trying to say is, you can't then say Pope Francis is promoting pagan idolatry and pagan worship, because so far as we know, what was handed to him was Our Lady of the Amazon. And I haven't seen Pope Francis say, no, this wasn't Our Lady of the Amazon, this is something else. And should he have come out and clarified, okay, no, you're wrong when you say this is neither sacred or profane? Yes, he should have. He should have come out and said that. Absolutely. But still, again, objectively speaking, you got to prove the case that this is actually something that Pope Francis is promoting. By as far as idolatry, you actually need to show that he's trying to promote idolatry. Because insofar as I can tell, he was trying to promote Our Lady of the Amazon, and it was scandalous and it was imprudent. And then others started perceiving it in one way and another, and he didn't come out and clearly and sufficiently squash it. And that's a problem.
Even in the New Testament, you don't even eat meat that has been sacrificed at a non-Christian temple or altar.
Actually, I thought in the context that he allows you to eat the meat sacrificed to an idol. I thought in the context, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought in the context of 2 Corinthians 6, he allows you to, as long as it's not against your conscience.
Because we read in Psalm 95, the gods of the nations are devils, are demons. Another,
and that's the thing we don't hear enough about. That's the other side that I want to balance out too, because we keep talking about the good, the aspects of paganism that are good, and oh, okay, fine, I get it. We've heard enough about that. Can we now talk about the fact that their pagan deities are demons? Can we talk about that? At some point, can we have that conversation? Because Paul wanted to have that conversation. Can we have that conversation maybe at some point? Is that possible that we could do both? That we could say that it's both and? Yes, there are some good elements in here, like Paul does in Acts 17, but then he also goes to say, but you also have some really bad elements. You're worshiping demons. Can we do both? I want to do both. And what I'm just getting is people are doing one or the other. And it's not very balanced. It's not even consistent with Paul's approach. Yeah, that's another point that we really have lost. Okay, sure, you have some good elements, but you're worshiping a demon objectively.
quote that has been forgotten, sadly, in our time is from the Syllabus of Errors. This comes from 1846 from Pope Pius IX. And I'll put it on the screen here for you. It doesn't, aha, here we go. And there we are. You just scrunch it up a bit. There we go. Condemned statement. Man may, in the observance of any religion whatever, find the way of eternal salvation and arrive at eternal salvation. Condemned.
Yeah, and thank y'all for confirming there in the chat. I didn't get a chance to look up 2 Corinthians again, but from my recollection, he does permit it in the case of those who it doesn't go against their conscience. But then if it offends your brother whose conscience it goes against, you shouldn't eat that in front of them. Is what's going on, to my recollection. So I appreciate y'all confirming that.
If you say that statement or agree with that, you are condemned by the Catholic Church and by Pope Pius IX. We are not allowed to think that, believe that, or say that. Not good. Not good. Now, it will be tempered. It will be modified for those who want to defend kissing the Quran or defend saying Well, we should encourage Muslims to be good Muslims. We should encourage Jews to be good Jews. We could.
And I agree with Dr. Marshall here. We should be encouraging them to convert to Christianity. That's the only thing we need to encourage them to do. We don't need to encourage them to remain where they're at and be good in what they're at, because somehow God's grace is extraordinarily communicated through their religion as a channel, as a sacrament, as a means of grace. No. We need to tell them to convert to Christianity. We don't need them to be content with where they're at. We can understand that, sure, God could exceptionally unite one of these people to the church in very extraordinary and exceptional circumstances because of Christ and what he has done, and in spite of their false religion. That being said, we don't need to rest and take assurance in that. We don't need to rest in it and presume upon God's grace. We need to go to where God ordinarily distributes his grace, and that is informal membership in the Catholic Church. So I agree with what Dr. Marshall is saying here, and I think we need to have that conversation more, but then we need to balance some of what we're hearing from him out too, because then it goes too far.
It should encourage Buddhists to be good Buddhists and Hindus to be good Hindus, because, truth is sprinkled in those religions, and if the adherents of those religions find those.
And somebody saying, Michael, how about Mother Teresa said about how she wants Hindus to be better Hindus, Muslims as better Muslims? Oh, first of all, I'd have to go and see if that was the case. I've heard that before, but I've never gone and confirmed it. So, but let's just assume it was true. Let's just assume it was true. She was wrong. She was wrong. Some saints say wrong things. She was wrong. That was wrong. Simple as that. Not everything a saint says is right. You can say, with all due respect, that saint is wrong in light of the tradition of the church. And you can know that they're wrong because of that. That doesn't mean that saints don't normally have, I don't want to say an authority, but that they aren't people that we should look to for wisdom. Of course we should. But we need to consider them in light of the teaching authority of the church and its tradition. We have to. They are under that. They are not above it.
Those sprinkles of truth, and they latch onto them, and they believe in those sprinkles, and they trust in them, the lesser lights available in these religions, they will be saved by Jesus. This is precisely what Bishop Barron taught last week.
And go and watch my video respectfully criticizing some aspects of what Bishop Barron said there. I don't agree with some of the things he said there. I think that he's effectively saying that, yes, there's some other elements that are in these religions that are good and true, and God uses that to communicate his grace, his salvific grace to them if they're invincibly ignorant. That's effectively how I was understanding Bishop Barron. If that's not his position, okay, that's fine. I'm willing to be corrected. I just would like for him to come out and explain further and clarify further. But that appears to be his position. And I'm going to say no. Those elements of truth that are in these other religions are good, and insofar as they follow those, they're in a qualified sense following Christ, but only on a natural level. That does not arise to the area or to the level of the supernatural, to the area of grace, to the level of grace. It's not salvific. It might lend itself to the salvific and make them better disposed to receiving grace, but in and of itself, just simply following those good and true elements in the religion is not good enough, because guess what? They're also following the bad elements in that religion too. So it kind of, counterbalances that out too. So it kind of offsets it, outweighs it, and contradicts it, and makes it moot. So following those things, even though there's some truth to when you follow reason, you're indirectly following Christ. But again, that doesn't mean it's salvific. That's the point. That's the point. And if any of those individuals are saved, it's in spite of what's going on there and in spite of their religion. It's not through those good and true elements. It's directly outside of them, in some way known only to God, as our tradition says. In some way only known to God, he would communicate his grace to them. And now I'm going to say again, based on Lumen Gentium 16, that's rare. It's rare. Most people are not following their conscience. Most people are not following God. Most people are not following the good. Most people have traded the good for evil and God for idols. Most people have done that according to Romans and Vatican II. Most people are not in this position that they're doing these things, that they're receiving God's grace in some extra sacramental way, and that's not happening in most cases. It seems that Vatican II is saying that would be an extraordinary case, and most people are doing the opposite. So they're in danger, and we need to go and evangelize them and not tell them, hey, just be comfortable where you're at.
When he said that people can be saved by the, quote, lesser lights in other religions. I'd encourage you to check out that video. It's here on the channel, Dr. Taylor Marshall channel on YouTube. And the problem with this way of thinking is it includes the Karl Rahner jump. I talked last time, I won't go into it too much, about who Karl Rahner is.
And again, if I'm understanding Rahner correctly, I think he's wrong. And I think that he's the basis for Bishop Barron's position. I think it's wrong. And I think that's not the best representation of Vatican II. And I think that it does lead to these practical problems. So I've criticized Rahner's position here, even before Dr. Marshall ever started talking about this.
And why he's important. He's the foremost important theologian and influencer at the Second Vatican Council. He's a Jesuit, died in 1984. A friend, even a mentor of Ratzinger, and really the pioneer of reimagining and reshaping Catholicism.
Michael says, Barron clarified that by analogy, one can survive a fall from an airplane, but it's better to have a parachute, the fullness of means of salvation. But that's aside from the fact of what I was criticizing. That's completely a different area of what I was criticizing. When we're talking about these survivals, is he saying that the survival is because Christ communicates his salvific grace through the good and true in these false religions? That's the impression I'm hearing and getting. And I would say, no, that's wrong. He doesn't communicate his salvific graces through those. Those true elements might help them be better disposed to the salvific graces, but they still do not rise to the supernatural. They're still on the natural. So they wouldn't be the means by which he would communicate the grace. If you accept that position, I agree, that's going to then lead to a lot of problematic, conclusions by way of practice. You would basically be able to say, hey, you can just kind of stay where you're at. Whereas I want to say that it is in spite of what's going on in the religion and completely bypassing that religion. So there's the grace is not communicated in any way through the religion itself, even the good and true elements in it. It's done in a way known only to God. If it happens, if it even happens, we don't even know for sure if it happens. But if it happens, it seems to be exceptional.
Catholicism during the 1960s and after the 1960s. Still taught in Catholic seminaries. Now, he is a smart guy. He knows you can't say, hey, there's salvation in other religions. Just be a good Muslim, because those religions themselves save. He knows that the Catholic tradition teaches you must be saved.
Somebody's asking, wasn't he a Peritus? Yeah, he was a Peritus. Actually was, partly worked on Lumen Gentium, the very document that I'm using to disagree with him on. Sure, I don't have a problem with that. Rahner's interpretation is not official. And just because one of the individuals was there at Lumen Gentium who has an incorrect interpretation of Lumen Gentium doesn't mean that that's somehow the interpretation that the bishops backed up and voted, or that I'm bound to believe. I'm going to say Rahner's interpretation is corrected by the tradition as a whole. You have to read these documents in light of our tradition, just like we do with all of our other councils. So I can say that Rahner, even though he was there, I can still say Rahner was wrong because he's going against our tradition. when he has that position. He's not denying any dogmas, but he is still going against our tradition. He is still doing that. Yes. That's why I can say, I don't care if he was there. I don't care if he helped write the document, which I don't think he helped write it, but I'm just saying. I don't care even if he did. So what? It's the interpretation that is the most important. And again, in history, we'd be surprised some of the people who had their hands in helping write some of the documents that we all accept now as Catholics. So let's be consistent. As I've shown previously, we saw Taylor Marshall criticize Gregory Baum, and I get that. I understand. But that doesn't mean that Dignitatis Humanae is wrong any more than now Pastor Eternus is wrong because of Joseph Kloiken and his role in Vatican I and Pastor Eternus. Does that mean we throw out now papal infallibility because of Joseph Kloiken and what he was doing at the time? Is that what's going on? No, we all accept Pastor Eternus as traditional Catholics, right? Okay. So we can't use that argument against Dignitatis Humanae. All right, same applies here. You couldn't use that argument with Karl Rahner.
Saved through Jesus Christ. John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. So here is the 4-stage modernist argument that they use. Number 1, do all religions have at least some elements of truth in them? They ask you that question. It's a rhetorical question because they know you're going to say yes. Let me give you some example. The Quran says that Jesus is the Messiah. That is true. And so there is a truth in the Quran. The Quran says Our Lady, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Miriam, says that she's sinless, that she's perfect. That is true. In Roman paganism, it says that Zeus, or Greek Zeus, Roman Jupiter, he's the greatest god and he controls the weather and the lightning. And in Psalm 134, verse 7, we read that the God, the one true God, quote, brings up clouds from the end of the earth. He hath made lightnings for the rain. He bringeth forth winds out of his stores. So we see that even Greek and Roman paganism has parallels with the one true God. However slight, they're there. In South America, the Pachamama, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, she symbolizes life and fertility, love, childbearing, newness, nature, and a healthy, clean earth, renewable energy. And these are all things that Christians can agree with and celebrate. And so we see that the Pachamama idol or statue also has truth in it. So if you kiss, burn incense in front of the Pachamama, have a Pachamama procession, put a Pachamama on your Catholic altar, what you're really doing is you're just acknowledging the truth and the goodness of what the Pachamama represents. Nature, childbearing, fertility, love, all that. See the problem here? There's slippage. Okay, so your Karl Rahner, your Bishop Barron, even your John Paul II is going to say, okay, so there's truth in these religions.
And yeah, I see the problem with what he's saying, but he puts a spin on it that we don't have to go to. And it does lead to the conclusion then that if what he's saying is true, that now your Pope is leading idolatry. And why did I come back to Catholicism if that's true? Why did I come back? I should have stayed Eastern Orthodox if that's the case. Why? What are you selling me here at this point? Why should I become Catholic again? Your Pope's promoting idolatry and I need to become Catholic? That's your position? No, I'm good. I'll I'll go back to the Reformed or the Eastern Orthodox before I go and take that position. And again, just because somebody who maybe have been there or others may have intended idolatry in this act doesn't mean the Pope is now promoting it, because we know that some people, unfortunately, especially in kind of South America area, sometimes overly venerate the Virgin Mary to the point that it might be idolatry in some cases. I wouldn't say that means that, oh, we shouldn't venerate the Virgin Mary, or now the Catholic Church is promoting these things because we've allowed for the different ways in which we can venerate the Virgin. No, that's going too far. Again, abuse doesn't negate proper use. So, just because maybe some, excuse me, had taken that position, possibly, I don't know, when it comes to Pachamama, doesn't mean the Pope is actually directly promoting pagan idolatry. And that's where I think he's going too far.
And therefore, since Jesus is the truth, therefore Jesus is saving and communicating a means of grace.
And somebody sends a super chat. Thank you. Why does it matter if you were writing or drafting something? I drafted many papers for my mentor as student, but I had clear instructions. Yeah, look. And first of all, he didn't even have any role in writing Lumen Gentium, to my recollection. But yeah, he was a theological advisor. Now, would that somehow, even if he did, let's say he has a false understanding or interpretation of Lumen Gentium, and he was partly responsible for writing it. Let's just pretend for the moment. That wouldn't change really anything to what I'm saying. You know, we did take some documents in our history and accept them into our tradition, and not all of them were written by people who were entirely Orthodox. Let's put it that way. So we have done this in the past. I don't want to throw out now those traditions. I would just say that we need to understand that just because somebody had some involvement in the formulation, perhaps of a dogma, doesn't mean that everything that they said or did or believed was right. It's as simple as that. We have to recognize that's just as true in our pre-conciliar tradition as it is in our post-conciliar tradition. And when I hear people using these arguments to criticize Vatican II, I just think, you don't know your history very well. You really don't know the preconciliar era very well. You don't know how we've received certain dogmas. You don't know very much about the ecumenical councils, and you're being entirely inconsistent.
Means of salvation through these religions. And this is the Karl Rahner leap. It's the Karl Rahner jump. All right. I don't think that Pope Pius X or Pope Pius V or St. Thomas Aquinas is going to make that leap and that jump.
And what is it with the show? All of these trolls are coming out. I'm having to block people left and right. It's ridiculous. I can talk about anything, any topic, about other issues, and we don't nearly get all of the toxic people in the chat. All of a sudden, when I start talking about Taylor Marshall, all the toxic people come out. Why is that? What's going on?
With Karl Rahner. That is what's new and novel with Karl Rahner, and it is the spirit of Vatican II.
The spirit of Vatican. Here we go with that. Yeah, way to go, using a liberal concept. Nice, Taylor Marshall. I've addressed this and criticized it before. The spirit of Vatican II is a liberal concept. And what some of these reactionary traditionalists are doing is they're conceding the ground to the liberals and saying, yeah, Vatican II was either heretical or is more than just a council. It's a whole spirit behind it. And, There's different theories, but what we're doing when we use that terminology is we're conceding ground to the liberals. They just have a different conclusion than the liberals. So, but they're conceding the same territory, and we shouldn't be doing that. That's why I did a show saying, let's take back Vatican II. Let's take it back as traditional Catholics. We need to bring it, incorporate it back into our patrimony. Somebody asked, which trolls am I talking about? You haven't noticed the chat? I haven't been paying attention much to the chat, but I've seen some things already. I've been booting them because, wow, they always come out when I do these Taylor Marshall videos.
The spirit of Vatican II is nature is good, reason is good, other religions have goodness and truth in them. You just find the truth, the true, the good, and the beauty in whatever you're doing in your life, even if you're an atheist, and you will be worshiping and having a relationship with Jesus, and you will be saved. I talked about the two-handed offer, the right-hand offer and the left-hand offer. The right-hand offer of salvation, and you hear this in Bishop Barron, is, and you see it too in things that John Paul II did, like in this instance. The right-hand offer is, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. Believe in him. He fulfilled the entire Old Testament. He was born of a virgin. He lived a sinless life. He is our high priest. He died on the cross to redeem us from all of our sins. He rose on the third day. He sent us the Holy Ghost on the feast day of Pentecost. He established his church by the 12 apostles, the prince of which was St. Peter, and he secures the deposit of faith from AD 33 until the end of time in the one church that he established, the church that's universal all over the world, the Catholic Church. That's the right-hand offer. It's a traditional kerygma, the gospel. But now in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, that's embarrassing to say. It's not tolerant. It's not multicultural. It's not ecumenical, and it doesn't take into account the greatest virtue of all in the modern era, diversity. So then you give the left-handed offer. And what's the left-handed offer? Well, if you don't like the right-handed offer, which is believe and repent of your sins and be baptized into Jesus Christ and his church, you just follow your own path, follow your own conscience, and find truth in your own religion, philosophy, worldview, and that is Jesus, and you will be saved. In other words, believing in Jesus and following the right-hand traditional gospel as preached by the church, that's the privileged way, as Bishop Barron calls it, the privileged way of salvation.
And so I agree with some of this criticism here of this view. But as I've said, I then disagree with some of the other things that Dr. Marshall wants to say.
But that's only stage 2. We haven't got to stage 3 yet. Stage 3 is that you openly communicate to other religions that they do not need to convert to Christ in order to find happiness in this life or the life to come. This, however strictly or loosely you want to interpret Lumen Gentium, this is the idea. This is the Vatican II spirit. This is all about ecumenism. One of the pictures that I showed last week was, hopefully it's here. Yes, here. The Assisi 1986 meeting. I showed last week. This is John Paul II with all the leaders of the church, and they're all invited to pray and hold their own religious liturgies inside Catholic churches. In this case, the Basilica of St. Francis. You can see here in this picture that the Dalai Lama, who was present, he and his...
I have same problem with Assisi 1986 as I do the other issues. Pachamama and the kissing of the Quran. Same exact criticism. What John Paul II was intending wasn't for them to engage in idolatry or anything like that, but that's irrelevant. I really don't care what John Paul II intended. All I care about at the end of the day is the fact that scandalized many people, including myself. I remember seeing the video and I saw clips of it from A Woman Who Rides the Beast from Dave Hunt when I was a Protestant, and that really turned me off to Catholicism. And for a long time, I thought that Catholics were idolaters because I had seen that. It had scandalized me and had for a very long time prevented me and become a barrier for me to become a Catholic. John Paul II, unintentionally, was a barrier for me because of that, to become Catholic. And I'm sure that's not only the case for myself, but for many others. It was an unnecessary scandal. And frankly, this is really, I want to say useless at this point. Why are we even having these get-togethers? I can maybe see a get-together where we condemn violence or something and say that we want to see peace or something. I can maybe see that, but at what point are we going to have these get-togethers where we talk about our differences and we call these people to Christ? At what point are we going to do that? That's my question. I would be a lot more comfortable with us having these little powwows with other people and having joint statements with them on the things that we can both agree on. I would be a lot more comfortable with them if we were simultaneously also having meetings with them where we tell them the truth about the gospel and why they need to convert and why they don't need to remain where they're at right now and why they're in danger objectively.
His buddies, they set up on a Catholic altar on top of the tabernacle of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ an idol of Buddha. Yes, it really did happen.
An idol of Buddha? I mean, I know there's some Buddhists who see him as God, but I think the majority of Buddhists don't actually believe that he's God, in the way that we understand. So I don't know. I want to call it an idol in one sense, but then I understand that there's some qualifications to what Buddhists believe about him. Either way, it shouldn't be on our altar, whatever it is. Whatever it is, it symbolizes something that is not something we're appropriating. So why is it there, right? It's not like we've taken any of this and appropriated it to Christianity and this is well established that we've appropriated it and we've put the necessary safeguards in there. We haven't done anything. We just had these people allowed into the church, and they, without the permission of the Pope, did this. Put a statue of the Buddha on the idol. Scandalous. Shouldn't have been there. There should have been some better safeguards. We shouldn't have been doing this to begin with. Do I really need to go on?
In 1986, organized and arranged by John Paul II. I'm not saying John Paul II agreed to this and promotes this, but he did agree to and promote.
Oh, and somebody's mentioned the Eastern Orthodox. Well, it's interesting y'all bring up the Eastern Orthodox in relation to Assisi, since representatives from the Orthodox were there. Just saying.
An ecumenical gathering in which this was promoted, and it's wrong. I know there's people probably right now in the live chat and they're saying, yeah, but he's a saint, Taylor. He's a saint. He's a saint. He's a saint.
Do you believe that, Dr. Marshall? Do you believe he's a saint? I'm just curious. Do you believe that?
He's a saint. He did good things. Eastern Europe, communism. Okay, I get all that. But just because he did some good and he had great love for the rosary and for Our Lady, that doesn't mean that we get to approve of this.
And I agree. We shouldn't be approving of this. We have no business having a Buddha on any of our altars. Period. This is plain as day. Why are we even having to have this discussion? This should be so obvious if you are a Christian. If you can't read the New Testament and walk away feeling like, you know what? It's all right to have a Buddha on the altar. Yeah, it's all right, You can't walk away saying, well, because y'all have some good elements, it's okay to now do this. Right. Because that's exactly what Paul then told the Corinthians. Well, this demon worship, that these pagans are part of, well, they as I noted in Acts 17, they had some good elements. So I guess that, we can now go and sacrifice to idols, right? Isn't that what Paul said? Pretty sure Paul said that. Yeah, Paul didn't say that. So
look at our current crisis in the Catholic Church. Idolatry, indifferentism, lack of belief in transubstantiation and the real presence, German bishops allowing and planning for the blessings of unnatural ways of life.
somebody said, I didn't know about the Eastern Orthodox being there. Oh, you're in for a treat then. I say that, facetiously. Yeah. Now, they're going to say, well, our popes aren't, our bishops aren't infallible. Well, we don't believe that our popes are infallible in this kind of circumstance either. That's irrelevant. The point is you're in communion. Well, I mean, some of these bishops are dead, but point is you would have been in communion with these bishops. That's problematic in the first millennium.
It's time that we pause, maybe we pull over on the highway and reassess what we're driving and where we're going. Now, you saw when I did the video on Bishop Barron and we talked about Ben Shapiro and we talked about his sermon and the lesser lights, that's the stage 3, right? So stage 1 is there's truth in other religions. Stage 2 is, well, if there's truth in other religions, there is salvation in other religions. Stage 3 is encouraging people who aren't Christian to go on with their religion. Stage 4 is,
and I'm sure this is true about some people, but it doesn't mean that it actually is traced back to Vatican II. But I'm sure there are some people who believe this, and I think that we need to condemn that for sure.
The Pope kissing the Quran. Stage 4 is where, wrong image, here it is. Stage 4 is where you say, you make this final connection. You say to yourself, well, if other religions contain truths that are salvific, the lesser lights, that means the other religions have means of grace within them.
And I'm sure some people believe that. Again, it does not go back authentically to Vatican II. It is not our tradition. The magisterium has not backed up that position. It's contrary to the magisterium. And I think that view needs to be criticized, rightly so.
Channel ways of grace from Jesus, this is what they think. There's channels of grace from Jesus into Islam, into Talmudic rabbinical Judaism, into Buddhism, into Hinduism, into voodoo, into animism, and even into atheism, as Bishop Barron says. And many, many post-Vatican II experts will say, yeah, atheists can be saved, sure. If all these means of grace are channeled in time.
Vatican II also, by the way, doesn't teach that atheists can be saved. It says that God doesn't withhold his salvation from those who have not come to an explicit knowledge of God, meaning before they die, they would come to an explicit knowledge of God and could even presumably become a formal Christian. Just means God's grace is not unavailable to them, which is true, of course. Even somebody who is in a state of unbelief could be given grace and then believe and trust in Christ and be united to his church, be baptized and all that, right? Isn't that possible? Yeah. So Vatican II doesn't teach that, oh, okay, well, you can remain an atheist. First of all, an atheist is not somebody who has not arrived at an explicit knowledge of God. That's somebody who now denies God. But aside from that, it just says God's grace is not withheld from them. It is available to them, I should say. And that's true. We believe that God gives his grace to every single human being, period. That doesn't mean that they make good use of it or are going to be redeemed. Just means it's available to them. Nothing controversial controversial about what Vatican II is saying here. But some people like to say, well, because of what Vatican II is saying here, that then means that they are going to be saved. And that's jumping ahead of the text, beyond the text, I should say, to something it doesn't say, and then taking a position that is now contrary to our tradition. And you can't do that. You have to read Vatican II in light of our tradition.
Funneled into these religions, that means that the means of grace should not only be approved of, they should be celebrated, they should be revered, they should be promoted. For example, baptism is a means of grace. It's a sacrament. What do we do with baptism? We celebrate it, we revere it, we promote it. It's one of the most important things in our religion. Christ said, unless you're born of water and the Holy Ghost, you cannot be saved. You cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, period. Baptism was a major part of the preaching of Jesus.
And so somebody promoting Trad Patrick again, let me block them. That's nonsense. Stop promoting this guy. This guy, from what I saw, was pretty extreme SSPX and was completely misrepresenting me the other day on social media. I'm not interested in having a discussion with somebody like that. No, I'm good.
It's Christ. And we know it is the means of grace, the means of justification and regeneration when there's faith. So we celebrate it, we revere it, we promote it. Same with the Eucharist, same with confirmation, same with holy orders and matrimony. We promote it, we celebrate it.
Oh, yeah. So this was, I haven't seen the video, but the video title was, "Why is Lofton so dumb?" And this is the guy that y'all were, not y'all in the chat, but the people that I booted, y'all wanted me to get him on the show. Seriously? I don't have time for people like that. I'm sorry. No.
Revere it. Holy water, sacramentals, scapulars, crucifixes, all of these are means of grace. So we celebrate, revere, and promote. Well, if these other religions in their lesser lights, their religious truths, are salvific, Catholic consistency demands.
Oh, and let me apologize to the SSPX. I'm glad you brought this up. Trad Patrick is SSPX resistance, not SSPX. Mea culpa. I'm sorry, all y'all SSPXers. I apologize for tainting y'all with him. The resistance don't want a relationship with him. Right, sure. I understand that. I get that. I didn't know. I thought he was SSPX because I watched or maybe read 10 seconds of something he posted, and that was it. And I saw that this wasn't worth my time. I'm not going to watch any of the videos or interact with that. But I'm glad that you clarified that so that the SSPX can have their name cleared.
Revere, and promote those other religions. And that is what you see depicted in this photograph. John Paul II is taking Lumen Gentium 16 to its logical conclusion.
No, he's not. He's not taking it to its logical conclusion. Stop slandering the bride of Christ, Dr. Marshall, because the bride of Christ in an ecumenical council, as we note in our own tradition, an ecumenical council is, go read the opening speech of Vatican II, by the way. It's actually noted even there by John the 23rd. An ecumenical council is a manifestation of the union between Christ and his church. Did you know that? That's part of our patrimony. To say that what it's teaching leads to this kind of stuff is slander, in my opinion, on the bride of Christ. And I'm sure that's not what Dr. Marshall intends. But it's still, objectively, that's what it is. Stop slandering Vatican II. Stop saying things about it that aren't true. Maybe get a little bit more balanced instead of evangelizing people to sedevacantism and Eastern Orthodoxy at this point, because that's all you're doing. Because people are listening to this and they're saying, oh, wow, if Vatican II leads to me kissing the Quran, I'm gone. And rightly so. They should be gone if that's true. But that you're pushing people away from the Catholic Church at that point. You're pushing people away from the fullness while criticizing people that you believe are also not bringing people to the Catholic Church, but your actions are then pushing people away from the church itself. So you're really no better. So stop slandering the bride of Christ, its magisterium, its teaching authority. We can say some aspects of Vatican II might not have been the best decisions. I don't think that there was anything in there that's evil. I'm not going to say there was anything in evil, but I would say there's some things in there that may not have been the best prudent decisions. Sure. And we are permitted to say that. Donum Veritatis 24:3. We can say that. But to accuse it of heresy, saying that it leads to kissing of the Quran, we go way too far with this.
This picture is Lumen Gentium 16. This picture is Vatican II. It is the celebration.
No, it's not. No, it's not. This is, again, buying into effectively the liberal narrative, which is the hermeneutic of rupture, discontinuity. You're undermining the authority of the church, Dr. Marshall. You're slandering the bride of Christ, even though I'm sure you don't intend that and believe that. That's still what you're doing. To say that it leads to this is just, wow. Okay, well, if you believe this, Dr. Marshall, why are you still Catholic? That's my question. Why are you still Catholic? If you believe Vatican II leads to this, why not just go sedevacantis and just say that, you know what, this wasn't actually an ecumenical council? Because if you understand what an ecumenical council is, I don't think that you can maintain that position. So it would make more sense to just say, well, Vatican II isn't an ecumenical council. That would logically make a little bit more sense, although that then leads to other problems. I could see you doing that or going the Eastern Orthodox route, but that's then going to lead to other problems as well. But to take this position of, I'm going to still call myself a Catholic, present myself as a Catholic apologist, and now say that an ecumenical council leads to that, and this is a picture of our most recent ecumenical council. Wow, you go too far.
Of ecumenism and the principles taught by Vatican II. And I'm sure if you asked John Paul II, why'd you do this? He would start talking about Vatican II.
I'm sure John Paul II would base Assisi, the kissing of the Quran, and other things. I'm sure Pope Francis would base some of these things on Vatican II. I'm positive about it. That doesn't mean that they're right. But yeah, I'm sure he would. In fact, I think he did, John Paul II. I think he did try to appeal to Vatican II. But I think he's wrong, 100%. I don't think there's anything in Vatican II that allows for this kind of imprudence and scandal. There's nothing in there that allows for that. But there are things in Vatican II that would prohibit scandal and these kinds of imprudent acts. There are things in there in Vatican II that would prohibit them. But I don't think there's anything in there that would allow it. And if I'm wrong, show it to me. Let me see it. Because everything that I've seen seems to be the opposite. So what we could now say is that some popes are wrong in their understanding of some aspects of ecumenical councils and matters of prudence. Yeah, I know that. Welcome to Donum Veritatis. We all agree with that. Again, we've been saying that, of course. Of course. Popes can err on matters of prudence. They can't, however, habitually err on matters of prudence, as Donum Veritatis notes. Right? They can't habitually err. And that's what you're going to have to maintain if you say that Vatican II is heretical. You would actually have to maintain even more than that. You would have to say the teaching office itself, confirmed by multiple popes over a long period of time, has erred. So I don't have a problem with saying here and there popes are making errors in judgment and prudence, and that they would even base it on something that they think is in our patrimony. I mean, look, when John the 22nd tried to, it was 22nd, right? You know, the one who denied the beatific vision. When he denied the beatific vision in his homilies, he was trying to appeal to what he understood to be the tradition of the church, but he was wrong, right? So just because John Paul II might appeal to something in Vatican II doesn't make him right, and doesn't even mean that Vatican II actually teaches it any more than our tradition denied that the saints enjoyed the beatific vision when they die.
He would quote Lumen Gentium. Don't know that for a fact, but that's my guess. Why do I say that? Because on another occasion, John Paul II said, pull it up so you know it. Where is it at? Here you go. On another occasion, this is from the Vatican website, he said, may John the Baptist protect Islam. John Paul II. Here it is.
Yeah, and that was extremely imprudent. Why would you want to ask to protect a false religion? Do you it's hard for me to think that John Paul II doesn't know how scandalous that sounds and confusing that's going to sound and misleading that's going to also sound. It's hard for me to think that he doesn't know that. It's another one of those areas I would say this act is extremely imprudent. It was scandalous. It should have never been said. Why? What was the purpose of this? Protect Islam? Islam denies our Lord. There are elements in it that are true and good. I understand that. There are also elements in there that are false and evil and work against good and work against Christ. And when you say, God, protect this, everybody's going to hear you saying, protect the whole thing. Not protect some good elements. Nobody's going to understand it that way. And that wouldn't even make sense. God, please protect the good elements in Islam. No, nobody's going to interpret it that way because it wouldn't even make sense. So this is what's being said is just ridiculous. I could see, may God protect Muslims. I could see a prayer for that because you care about an individual's well-being or something. I could see that. But Islam's a religion. Islam, is a set of beliefs. Makes no sense whatsoever. And to me, I've long decried this and thought this is another one of those moments where John Paul II made a significant error in judgment in the matter of prudence.
This is from the Vatican website, document John Paul II. I highlighted it for you. In the final sentence, John Paul II says, may St. John Baptist protect Islam and all the people of Jordan and all who participated in this celebration, a memorable celebration. I'm very grateful to you all. Thank you very much. This is an address from John Paul II. He's asking John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus Christ, to protect not people who are Muslims, I'd be fine with that, but protect Islam. This is the way that John Paul II thought with respect to Islam. And so this is what, you think, well, how do we get to the point where Francis would allow?
And I agree. I think that this is the way John Paul II thought, and it was imprudent. And I don't deny or doubt that he's in heaven. But I do think that it was not the best act of Pope Francis to declare him a saint in light of things like this, because it's just going to confuse people. I understand at this point our canonizations just mean that the person is in heaven, and that's fine. I'm very happy that John Paul II's in heaven. Wonderful. But I also recognize that when people hear St. John Paul II, they're going to now think, well, everything he did was to be emulated, and that's not the case at all. There are some things that he did that should not be emulated, should not be followed, that we should publicly disagree with. We need to do so charitably, of course, but I think that there are some things that we need to say, no, that's just wrong. This is wrong. We can do so humbly and respectfully, but we do need to be able to say that. Again, so that being said, I don't think it was the best idea to canonize John Paul II, but it was done, and I believe that he is a saint, and I believe he did a whole lot of good, and I think that he did some things that were very virtuous. So there's a lot of good that could be said, but then there's this kind of stuff that is just going to confuse people and make them think that it's now okay, and it's misleading people, and we shouldn't do that. All right.
and command Pachamamas to be placed in the Vatican gardens and in churches. And when Alexander Chukoil threw the Pachamamas into the Tiber River, the Pope wanted them fished out.
Didn't Dr. Marshall, I remember watching his initial video, he didn't know how to pronounce his name, didn't really know anything about Alexander. But then it turns out that they had basically discussed this in advance, that Alexander would do this. They had met, they had lunch and everything, you know. So just seemed a little disingenuous that, you know, Dr. Marshall had basically planned this with this individual, but then acts like he doesn't know him, and this is the first time he's ever talking to him. I found that concerning from Dr. Marshall, but maybe he has an explanation for that. I just haven't heard it.
And restored back into the churches. How do we get to that point? It's Pope Francis was applying the same logic as this. It's the same exact logic. If there's truth in those non-Christian religions and traditions, we must, there is an imperative, we must honor, venerate, revere, and promote.
Doesn't logically follow. You can recognize truth in them and still say it doesn't need to be promoted because the false aspects in this religion are going against the true ones and are an impediment and a barrier for Christianity. Therefore, they should not be promoted. You see how that works? You see how I made a distinction there? See how I can say that, yes, they have some true elements, and yet we don't need to promote them, and we still need to evangelize them, and we can still say that it's harmful and dangerous, and that there's aspects to these false religions that's evil and demonic. We can still say all that. You see how I'm able to balance both of them out?
Those symbols, those signs of their religion. Do you see that it is the exact same trajectory?
No, I don't see that.
It's the principle. Well, there's truth in it, so let's go ahead and kiss it.
I don't see that. I see that with a false understanding of Lumen Gentium, how that would then lead to this. I agree that the false understanding of Lumen Gentium that we've heard, this is why I said, you know, respectfully, I think that Bishop Barron's view is going to lead to problems when it comes to decisions like this. That's why I said it, because I do think that lends itself, at least, if not necessarily leads to kissing the Quran, it does at least lend itself to this kind of stuff. I get that. But I would say that Bishop Barron's understanding is incorrect when it comes to Lumen Gentium. So is Ronner's. And we don't have to adopt that view. We can adopt a traditional view of Vatican II, which is what we're obligated to do. That's what we should be doing. And that doesn't then lead to this stuff that we're seeing here. There's a way that we can not go the route of, I reject Vatican II because I don't want to end up kissing Qurans. There's a way that we can avoid both, the kissing of the Quran and rejecting Vatican II. It's possible to do both.
I mean, I've never really read the Book of Mormon. I'm sure there's one true sentence in the Book of Mormon. I'm never kissing the Book of Mormon.
I wouldn't either, because there's elements in the Book of Mormon that are false. And what people are going to see, whatever my intention would be if I were ridiculous enough to kiss a Book of Mormon, which I wouldn't. But let's just say I had some kind of legitimate good intention or something somehow. People, what they're going to see is not my intention. They're going to see me kissing the Book of Mormon, and they're going to think that I'm revering what it teaches. And that would naturally be, a natural conclusion. Right, people wouldn't be way out there on a fence when it comes to that conclusion, right? It would be a legitimate conclusion for them to say that. So we avoid those scandals and we say, no, that's an imprudent decision. There's no good reason for me to be kissing a Book of Mormon, regardless. Period. No, there's no good reason, because this is going to scandalize people, even if there was some kind of, let's say there was some good reason to kiss a Book of Mormon, which I don't think there are, but let's just pretend there was. Does it outweigh the fact that people are going to be scandalized? The answer is no. It would not outweigh that. Therefore, it should not be done. Even if something is true and lawful, if it's going to be scandalous, you should not do it. Paul recognized the truth in pagan philosophers. That doesn't mean that he thought that they were right about everything. I agree. Of course. Of course. That's what I was saying about Paul. Acts 17, he recognized some truth in them, and then he also elsewhere says that they're following idols, and they're following demons in the following the idols. And he rejects that clearly. So I agree with Paul, basically. I take Paul's position. He can recognize the good and still condemn the evil and the demonic aspects to it. What's the best way to explain instances of imprudence like Assisi claimed to be based on the council erroneously? Is it in the ambiguity argument? No. It's in the idea that, well, if God can give his grace to people who are invincibly ignorant through their religion, and you might hear say, well, only through the good of it. That's weird. But through the good of their religion, I can then see somebody revering that because this is now a channel by which God is communicating grace. So I should kiss it. You see how that works? I can see it doesn't necessarily follow if you adopt that position. I grant it. It doesn't necessarily follow that you're going to kiss their tradition or Quran. But I do see how somebody would conclude that based on that assumption. I want to say none of the above. Yes, God can communicate his grace to people who are invincibly ignorant, but it's in spite of their false religion. It's not through the good elements in it. It's outside of it altogether. And it's in a way only known to God. And yes, they do have some true elements, and those things do help a person be better disposed to receiving God's grace. And when they follow those good elements, they're in a natural sense following the good, and that's ultimately Jesus, of course. So in a very indirect sense, they're now following Christ indirectly. But guess what? They're not just following the good in the religion. They're also now following the bad in the religion. So does that mean they're following Satan now? So you see that we're only hearing one side of the story. We now need to consider the other side of the story, and that is, well, they also have false aspects in their religion, and those things are leading them away from the good and the true and are a barrier. So if God saves any of them, it's in spite of their false religion. And none of that's going to lead to me kissing a Quran. So you see how I'm able to avoid the Quran, but I'm also able to avoid the idea that says there's no salvation outside of formal membership in the Catholic Church. Both of those need to be maintained. We don't need to kiss Qurans, and we do need to believe that there could be salvation outside of formal membership in the Catholic Church, that somebody could be an informal member. But it's not through their religion. It is in spite of it, and it's extrinsic to it, and in a way only known to God.
And I am never kissing the Quran, because the Quran denies the truth that I love so dearly, and that is Jesus died on the cross for my sin, and that Jesus is God the Son. He's the Son of God. Without that mystery, without that reality, life makes no sense. I'm going to go to hell. There is no redemption. There is no priest that can connect heaven to earth. There is no hypostatic union, fully God, fully man. All of that is a fairy tale. Why would I kiss the book that claims that was written by a so-called prophet who's no prophet at all?
And he wasn't, which again was why we should be kissing this thing. This is imprudent.
Who never...
We can respect individuals who are Muslims and wish good for them without kissing a book for that's part of their false religion. We can do both. And we can pray for world peace, and we can agree together that there should be world peace. No, I don't think we should pray together. That's something else. But we can, as individuals, pray for world peace, and we could be resolved with them that we are going to work to world peace and all this other stuff. But That doesn't mean we're going to now kiss their holy books because they're not holy. They're not the word of God.
Worked one miracle in his whole life that anybody ever saw, and had a harem of women and one wife that was well below the age of majority.
Which was common back then, right? Not to excuse it, but we do need to understand that wasn't something exceptional at the time. It was just a corrupted aspect of their culture, unfortunately. So again, that's not to excuse it. It is wrong, but we do need to keep in mind that was common in that territory. Just like sometimes killing people, ritual killings, and killing infants is common in some cultures when that's wrong.
Why would I kiss that book? You might as well hold up to me the what do they call it? The Bible of the Church of Satan. I'm not going to kiss that. There is no way.
Now, I would say there's a major difference between the Quran and the Bible of the Church of Satan, but be that as it may, there's still enough similarity between them to not kiss either.
Now, you might say, well, this was important to Muslims. Yeah, it showed Muslims, it showed the Pope revering the book of the Muslims. Are they going to convert to Christ now and receive baptism?
I agree with him. This is just going to make them think that it's okay to remain a Muslim.
No. And then what about all the Christians who saw this picture? It was published. What does that tell us?
Scandalizes us, especially those who converted from Islam to Christianity. They're going to be thinking, well, why did I convert? I'm now being persecuted? Because when you convert from Islam to Christianity, that causes some serious problems, right? It's just going to make them feel like, well, why did I convert?
We see our priests and deacons kiss the Gospels during Holy Sacrifice of the Mass on Sunday. And then we see the Pope kiss the Quran. That undermines faith. It's confusing. It's very confusing. So what is the answer to this? The answer is, like I said, we've been cruising on the highway since the 1960s.
As somebody says, why are people disliking the video? It happens every Taylor Marshall video. It's so funny, all of these dislikes. And that's fine. They can continue to dislike. I'm still going to criticize this stuff. I'm going to criticize areas that need to be criticized, period, no matter who it's coming from. People that I can appreciate or otherwise. Still going to criticize it. I've said before, I'm not doing this show ultimately for likes or subs. All that helps. All that is great. It's wonderful. But I'll do this show if I have zero support. I'll do this show if there are no subs and no likes, nothing, no patrons, nothing. I'll still do the show. For multiple reasons. Number one, it helps me to talk to other people and learn from them. But, people that I interview and stuff like that. But also because it helps balance out some of this stuff. So.
With a certain speed and a certain trajectory and a certain destination. And along the way, the hubcaps have been falling off and the fenders and the roof. I think it's time we pull over and we reassess where we're going, what we're driving, our whole purpose.
I agree, Dr. Marshall. We need to do exactly that. We need to stop and reassess where we're going, because where you're going is, whether you realize it or not, you're going to Sedevacantism or Eastern Orthodoxy. That's where you're going. Now, you might not carry it out to its logical conclusion. You might remain a professing Catholic the rest of your life. I don't know. I don't know the future. I don't know, whether or not you're going to carry it to its logical conclusion, or if you're going to maybe just backtrack some of this and say, hey, I was wrong, which I've done before, right? I've done this because I've taken a similar view to Dr. Marshall before, and I've had to say, nah, I was wrong. I was wrong about that. I went too far. I was being too much of a reactionary Catholic. I needed to balance some of that out. So I mean, I've done that before. It's possible Dr. Marshall will do that, but same time, it's possible that he won't, and he will carry this to its logical conclusion, and he'll go to Sedevacantism or Eastern Orthodoxy, or it's possible that he'll just continue to do as he's doing and not carry things to its logical conclusion, but then indirectly causing other people to go to Sedevacantism because they're going to carry this to its logical conclusion and then leave the Catholic Church. And don't tell me it's not happening, because I know it's happening. And by the way, again, notice the people in the comments. Every time Taylor Marshall I do anything with Taylor Marshall, some of the toxic people start coming out. That's the people he's starting to attract. Not everybody. I'm sure there's some great people who watch the show. I'm just saying he's starting to appeal to that kind of reactionary Catholic out there. And those are the ones who are already Sedevacantists or going Sedevacantists.
Is our purpose to sit down in interviews with famous people and say, well, yeah, I mean, you can believe in Jesus, be baptized, go to confession, go to mass your whole life, have Catholic guilt, hopefully get last rites, extreme unction, that's cool. Or just follow your own religion. Be a good Muslim. Be a good Hindu. Be a good atheist. Be a good Buddhist. There's some sprinkling of lesser lights in your tradition, and you're going to make it if you just follow that. We cannot do that, my friends. The church has never taught that that is the good news of Jesus Christ. In Acts, when the Jews come to Peter and say, what must we do to be saved? He said, repent and believe and receive baptism. This promise.
And that's what the church always taught, right, Dr. Marshall? You know what the church has also never taught? It's never taught that a heresy can be attributed to an ecumenical council. I'm just saying. It never taught that an ecumenical council could teach heresy. And yet that's what you say about Vatican II.
Promises to you and to your children. Acts chapter 2, verse 39, 40, around there somewhere. He didn't say, oh, yeah, you know, I'm talking about Jesus. I know you guys are Jews. You just keep doing do your best version of being Jewish and you're good. He did not say that to them. He did not say that. And we cannot say that. And we wonder why the churches are empty. We wonder why the children in the...
We're going to have to stop it there because we got another show coming up here in just a moment with Dr. Marshall. So I am going to exit this stream. We will be starting a new stream in just a few moments, so y'all stay tuned for that. Dr. Marshall is coming on to talk about the Debitum Peccati, in fact, so something he's written a lot about. So he's going to be on in just a few moments, so we'll maybe finish this up another time. I don't know. I think y'all pretty much got the gist of it, but if y'all want me to do more, let me know. Otherwise, we'll just move forward with the other things that we need to address. All right. See y'all here in just a little bit on the other stream. God bless.